Now, for more on the new attacks, we're joined by two guests. Sourabh Gupta, he's with the Institute for China-America Studies. He's the Senior Asia-Pacific International Relations Policy Specialist. And we're also joined by Victor Gao, Chair Professor at Soochow University. Gentlemen, thank you very much both for your time. Sourabh, let's start with you. This attack was well flagged, in terms of a retaliation for the attack just 2 weeks ago in Kashmir. How dangerous is this escalation?
Oh, of course, it is very dangerous. I mean, they're both nuclear-powered neighbors. They're next to each other. Pakistan doesn't have sufficient strategic space per se, so it's always fearful of what a conventional attack from India might look like, and so the situation can escalate really fast. We do have to remember, though, that there have been similar bombings during Modi's period in Kashmir, both in 2016 and in 2019. In 2019, when that happened, India, for the first time since 1971, when they last fought a full-fledged war, India, for the first time, crossed the international border and actually bombed places in Pakistan proper, not in Pakistan administered Kashmir per se only, because that is a disputed territory, but it had crossed the international border, the undisputed international border, and dropped bombs in Pakistan. As I gather, they have done it in more places, in multiple locations in Pakistan, and this will necessarily, from Pakistan's standpoint, require some sort of a rejoinder, just so as to project deterrence, if nothing else. So you can understand the stakes that are out here. India trying to create greater space to have conventional war under a nuclear umbrella, Pakistan trying to minimize that space, and where that ends up can be very dangerous.
Pakistan has said it had nothing to do with the attack on tourists in Kashmir. Even though several of the attackers were in fact Pakistani nationals. But should India have proved Pakistan was complicit before striking?
Yes, it should have proven, but but I think it's come to the point where India feels sort of fed up by the number of times it has been hurt by Pakistan-linked actors, if nothing else. And it's hard always to trace back and prove back, and to do that in a quick and immediate fashion. And therefore, I think from India's standpoint, what they're trying to do is to project that, okay, no more, never again. And if things get back, we can be really escalating to an awful situation out here. But I mean, I don't know if that cuts this thing with Pakistan, because the whole point at Pakistan's end is to not allow for an escalation. Is to ensure that if a situation escalates, it could escalate to a nuclear conflict, and therefore India should stay its hand. So it's a complicated issue, and kind of tracing back, yes, this is the reason, etc., etc. But I think the Indians have gotten beyond the point where they have to show that this was the reason, etc., etc., why we're doing something, and they're going to, like the Israelis in a way, show power first and then talk later.
It's a complicated situation, and also there's a lot we don't know at this point. But Victor Gao, to you now, India has accused Pakistan of being involved in the attack, and Pakistan, as I mentioned, has called for an independent investigation. It's been reaching out to world leaders to intervene. Iran was one of them. Who do you see as playing a role here? The UN, the US, or could China play a role?
Thank you very much. I think what is happening between India and Pakistan is of global concern, and the timing cannot be worse. And it is the right time to call on both India and Pakistan to exercise maximum restraint, to immediately cease fire, and to prevent any potential escalation of tension or the conflict between these two countries, because, as the previous distinguished panelist said, both India and Pakistan are armed with nuclear weapons, and the stake cannot be higher. Therefore, we need to do the right thing. Now, secondly, I think all the countries, relevant countries, can play a role to calm down India and Pakistan at the same time. China will be happy to play its role, the United States, Russia, and the United Nations Security Council, or even the General Assembly and the Secretary General, for example. All these people can play a very important role. Major Middle Eastern countries, which have very important relations with both Pakistan on the one hand and India on the other hand, can also play important role. So I think this is the time for diplomacy at its best to kick in to prevent any hothead from continuing to pull the triggers and firing at each other, for example, because we not only need to care for whatever that is happening between India and Pakistan, we also need to care about peace and security in the Indian subcontinent as a whole, as well as in the world at large.
The United States does have closer ties to India. Vice President J.D. Vance was in the region just 2 weeks ago when the attack happened. Does that play a role in whatever response the US may have, do you think?
Well, I hope the United States will do the right thing. However, there are experts or scholars who read a little bit too much into the bad timing because Vice President J.D. Vance was in New Delhi, and immediately afterwards, this whole thing blew up. So whether the United States and India compared notes, for example, or promised to each other strengthening their military cooperation, which may or may not have boosted the so-called confidence on the Indian side to take military actions into their own hands before coming up with any real proof about this the terrorist attack. This is yet to be proven. But I do hope the United States will do the right thing, call on India as well as Pakistan, as what China will do, and I hope Russia will do the same thing, and EU, major European countries, Middle Eastern countries, and the United Nations as a whole. I understand the Secretary General of the United Nations has already promised and made himself available as a potential intermediary. He needs to rush to New Delhi and Islamabad as quickly as possible, I hope, and do top-level diplomacy on the spot right away.
Sourabh Gupta, who has more to lose in this conflict? Some say that India is more at risk given there's relative peace and stability there versus Pakistan's general instability, but Pakistan has also seen an increased economic security of late. What impact might this escalation have on the economic welfare of both countries?
A bit hard to say. As I said, we've had situations in 2016, we've had situations in 2019, and frankly, one can go back to 2001 and 2008, where the incidents were much more major. I mean, the incident in 2001 was in the Indian Parliament. The incident in 2008 was in Mumbai, in one of the premier cities in this thing. And there is economic dislocation at the end of it, but I mean, the economic dislocation is limited. There has always been that talk in the background that, India is rising, India is growing, and it's a war with Pakistan which could kind of abort that growth and abort that rise. I have not really subscribed to it, and that's not been the evidence frankly. The unfortunate part of what this will do will be a continuation of the status quo between India and Pakistan, where they essentially keep their borders close to each other. They don't trade with each other. And at least on the Indian side, that would be seen as a vindication of the decisions that it has taken in this regard. Now, mind you, this has been for decades. And that's how it's going to be. So I don't think the economic dislocation element is the largest element out here. And we've seen situations like this, but obviously we don't need escalation. And I think the US, more than anybody, is going to get involved, Mr. Rubio particularly, even though Mr. Trump disdains this sort of mediation-related work. He's doing a little bit in Ukraine, of course. But this is somewhere far away where he doesn't want to touch. But once it becomes a nuclear issue, and a nuclear breakout issue, I think the US will get very active in telling both sides to step down while trying to keep India in its good graces, because India would be seen as not being able to action what it really wanted to do because of the nuclear umbrella, and will not have the sort of license that, say, the Israelis have in the Middle East. But that's how it's going to be, in my sense of things.
And Sourabh, we heard a little bit about the Indus Waters Treaty there from the reporter Daniel Khan. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that? New Delhi has partially closed the dams on the Chenab River into Pakistan as a strategic response. Does that intensify, this situation further, given we're now seeing conflict across the border?
That's actually a very good point, and I should have raised that in the economic element out there, because I think there's a real danger with regard to the Indus Water Treaty. Remember, this is one of the treaties which has really held up. It was negotiated in 1960. World Bank facilitated it, mediated, etc. Now, the problem with the treaty is that the Pakistanis feel that the Indians have been taking certain actions treaty-related in an economic context, in a hydrological context, which is not necessarily consistent with the treaty. They had a kind of an adjudication back in the 2000s. The adjudicator said India was playing borderline with this thing, but was still within the law. But I think in the time since, the Pakistanis believe that the Indians have not been consistent with that treaty. India probably understands that where its position is, and therefore at this point of time, this might be just a very good excuse for India to opt out of the treaty. And right now they are again in arbitration with regard to the treaty at the Permanent Court of Arbitration, and the Indians are not liking that play because, I mean, they might get adjudicated against. But I think this is providing ground. Remember, in 2019, when the previous incident happened, India had kind of shut down water data sharing with Pakistan. I fear this time they might not, maybe if not shut down the treaty, but at least, I mean, go about what they are trying to do from a hydrological standpoint in Kashmir, in Indian administered Kashmir, and not really care about what the Pakistanis feel about it, or what the World Bank feels about it. They will do it unilaterally and might even exit the treaty. And this can have economic consequences for an agrarian state like Pakistan, a downriver state.
Right.
And so, I mean, this is the one area I think we should be all rather concerned about when we talk of strategic stability, not just nuclear stability, but we're talking in terms of water sharing also.
And just finally, Victor Gao, the UN Secretary General, has said it's very concerned and has called for military constraint from both sides. How likely are we to see any diplomatic outreach between Pakistan and India, do you think?
Well, I think any diplomatic initiative between Pakistan and India will be less likely unless they are provided with intermediary services by other major powers or by the United Nations itself. So I think it is the real time for all the relevant countries to scramble into immediate action to call on both India and Pakistan to take the right action to prevent any further escalation of the tensions between them. Now, allow me also to say, the relations between China and Pakistan are ironclad brothers and sisters relations. We really support each other. So if any escalation of the tension will threaten the legitimate interest of the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Pakistan, I don't think any country should second guess the Chinese commitment to protecting and defending the legitimate interests, especially relating to the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Pakistan. So it is time for all the relevant parties to scale down their action, to calm down, to a ceasefire, rather than to try to think about using guns to solve whatever problems there are. And if you suspect any involvement in a terrorist attack, come up with proof and evidence rather than seizing the moment to take military action against another country, to strike into the other country's territory, causing civilian death, for example. And allow me to add, in the context of war, any stopping of a dam or stopping the flow of the water, causing drought or loss of life in another country may be considered as a war crime. And in a non-war context, any such action causing tremendous amount of hardship or loss of life or difficulties, etc., may be considered as a crime against humanity. Right. Therefore, I call on India to really use the maximum restraint and wisdom and reason and rationality, rather than using such extreme measures, which are causing tremendous amount of hardship for the civilian people in Pakistan. Right. It is the wrong thing to do, and it will be condemned and dealt with eventually, whenever the dust settles.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Victor Gao and Sourabh Gupta, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.